Why are all these Amazon aggregators buying Amazon brands? And what are they looking for? What exactly do they want from the brand that they are buying? That's what I'm going to be covering in this video. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to get new tips every week. Today I'm talking about what do Amazon aggregators want? And what I'm actually going to be presenting here is data based on answers from 42 active Amazon aggregators. So this is not any kind of evaluations or guesses or whatever. I mean, this is answers given by actual aggregators, so meaning that it's pretty accurate and it's very interesting. So let's take a look. But first, just to be clear that everyone understand what I'm talking about here. So what is an Amazon aggregator? So it means that this aggregator engages in rolling up Amazon businesses by way of merger and acquisition. So it just means that they're basically just buying these Amazon FBA private label brands. So the acquired brand, and key thing to understand here is that the acquired brand doesn't need to have anything special going on, because the main criteria here are numbers, so revenue and profit. So what key thing is really like the Amazon product listing, and basically the seller must be the business must be selling on Amazon. So I'm going to be presenting here a report, and it was actually interesting how I bumped into this. So Fortunet, this report is made by Fortunet, and I kept receiving some emails from Fortunet asking that they would like to but basically develop an exit strategy for one of my brands. So basically it's an investment banking firm that specializes in representing Amazon brands. So Fortunet is basically working together with both with the sellers and the buyers. So they have funny thing is that I guess they added me on some of their newsletter list, because I don't recall I don't think I responded to that email, but the next thing is that they sent me this kind of survey, and it's actually very interesting information. So it's a comprehensive survey among 42 active Amazon aggregators, and their goal with this was to find out what buyers really want and dispel some of the most common misconceptions among sellers. So these aggregators were asked 24 questions about their investment criteria. So about the investment criteria, factors that increase the valuation of brands, and other considerations related to their acquisition process and their plans moving forward. So some of the key findings included that, first of all, what are the most desired categories among these aggregators and ones that they really don't want to touch, and preferred deal structures. So what kind of deals are they interested in doing, then minimum net profit margins required, and how buyers value these non-Amazon revenues. So Fortunet is this investment bank focused on specifically helping on Amazon e-commerce sellers through the exit process. And as I mentioned, they work both with the sellers and then with the buyers. So if you want to read more about them, you can check out their website, fortunet.net. But let's start looking at this survey that they made. So first question is that, okay, what are these aggregators interested in doing? So the question was that, what will you do post-acquisition? So is there a plan to basically keep growing and flip the business, or grow and hold, or continue the seller's existing operations and strategy, or then something else? And as we can see, most of what these aggregators responded, that they are going to be growing and holding. So they are not just building a portfolio. They are actually going to be, they have a long-term strategy in growing this brand and then basically holding it for longer periods of time. So that was like 80% of the respondents. But I can tell you that basically I'm also together with one investor like building this portfolio, and I'm not really interested in growing any of these brands, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to like build this portfolio and then just sell it to some like for example the private equity company and so on. So I mean different aggregators have different kind of tactics. So and today there's like hundreds of these, and for example, some of these aggregators are planning to go public, and as we heard, I mean, if you participate the interview with our student Jonne, who is a member of this eBrands, which is also like an Amazon aggregator. I mean, their plan is to be working, buying these brands, and then work for at least 5 years. So, but basically my tactic is that I don't want to work for 5 years. I'm more interested in basically doing like 1, 2, or maximum 3-year project out of this. So I mean, different aggregators have different kinds of strategies, so that's good to keep in mind. And yeah, this was actually interesting that these buyers actually wish to grow and expand to a network of stores to really become this Procter and Gamble of the e-commerce space. So Amazon is really becoming like the shopping mall of digital era. And this is also interesting to see that, and really important to understand that. So here's a question: that when was the company like the aggregator founded? And as we can see, like majority of them were founded like 2020, so last year. So I mean, this is a really recent thing, and even the biggest company, Trasio, the biggest aggregator, I mean, that was founded in 2018. And if we take a look at like what is okay, fine, they are actually buying these different businesses, but how many businesses are they intending to buy in the next 12 months? And maturity is going to be looking at buying like 20 businesses, 15 to 20. So the summary of, I'm going to be going through some details about this report, but first, just to summarize these things is that, I mean, these aggregators place all their bets on Amazon. And this number of these acquisitions next year in 2022 should exceed 1,000, meaning that next year alone, they are going to be like all together buying like 1,000 different Amazon brands. I know, I mean, it sounds pretty amazing. Like next year, at least 1,000 Amazon brands will be sold. Yeah, it's pretty staggering amount. And currently, I mean, this merger and acquisition market, is still like very much concentrated it is still in like early stage, and we could see that like most of the acquisitions were made by approximately like 18% of the aggregators. And there are like many of these aggregators who have not even made their first acquisitions yet. I mean, some of them were founded already last year and they have not made any single acquisition yet. But this also means that, I mean, multiples are going to be increasing even further, because it's just a simple like a supply and demand thing. When there's just so many of these buyers, then I mean, it just means eventually that, okay, fine, I mean, the sellers have the bargaining power, and then you can actually charge more for your assets. So if we take a look at the different product categories that the aggregators prefer, so it really varies across different categories. And most of these are interested in evergreen products. And I mean, that's pretty self-evident, right? I mean, they want something that is sold like every single month of the year. They don't really want seasonal products. So they want evergreen products which are easy to operate and are usually not subject to massive regulatory requirements. So this does mean that basically some of the categories are excluded then, because there's many different, I mean, some of the categories have a lot of different requirements. So basically the most popular product categories are like home and garden, pet supplies, baby, outdoors, health, and personal care. And the least popular categories with these specific like aggregators were like toys, apparel, electronics, supplements, food, and fashion. And the reason being here that, I mean, all of these categories, I mean, these are much more complex to operate than the most popular ones, for the fact that there's just so many different like certificates, different kind of requirements, and different kind of licenses. And I mean, electronics equipment can be really, really complicated. And supplements, with supplements, you can typically get like pretty high multiple, but it also means that they are going to be like a lot of these restrictions and licenses, certificates, and all that stuff. And same thing with food. And additionally, especially with food products, is that then you need to consider is that, okay, what's the expiration date and those kind of things. So these are the least popular categories, simply for the fact that these take more effort in managing these. And that's why I'm always telling that, I mean, if your first product shouldn't be really from any of these categories, because it can be pretty complex in operating in this. So yeah, here we can see what are the categories that they are interested in. And home and garden here is a clear winner. Then we can see pets, baby, outdoors, health, tools, sports, beauty, and so on. And at least with these aggregators, I mean, none of them were interested in cell phones and accessories, simply for the fact that, I mean, for example, most of them can be like cheap products, and there can be a lot like driven by taste, so that makes an impact. So here's a question that, okay, are they only going to buy like private label business, wholesale, reseller, or like both? And majority of these aggregators want to have only private label businesses. So if you're having a wholesale business, then I mean, at least these aggregators, majority of them are not really that interested in your business, because it's really about like building this brand that stands on its own. And as seen previously, I mean, they are thinking about like building this whole like Procter and Gamble thing. So I mean, they're much more interested in doing like building brands and something that is not just reselling like other products from different brands. The next thing is the age of the business. So how does it impact? Like, for how long has the seller need to be in business for it to be like considered? So many of these aggregators are actually open to acquire very young businesses operating for a minimum period of 1 year only, as long as profitability is at least 15%. So I mean, we have already seen that, I mean, some businesses that have been sold, I mean, they have been less than 1 year old. And I can say like this has changed completely this year. I mean, last year, like 1 year ago, basically, at least my answer would have been that, I mean, typically it's going to be like 2 years of books. So 2 years of operating business, but I mean, it has completely changed this year. So the buyers are much more like willing to buy even like brand new businesses that have been operating even for like 6 months or so. Yeah. And it's interesting that, I mean, that majority intend to purchase more than 15 businesses in the next month. So we can see it like it's only 40% that's preferring to have like more than one year, but we can see that like 18% are saying that they have no minimum requirements of this operating history. So I mean, it doesn't really matter like how old the business is. I mean, as long as it looks like a good business. So even in a year, I mean, even in a matter of like half a year, I mean, seller can already build this solid proof of concept and show these long-term assets that can be used to grow the business. So a solid product, trademark listing, then a significant number of reviews. So yeah, this is actually a new thing that has happened like this year. Then region. Question was that, okay, do you prefer businesses selling in specific region? Meaning, is it selling in US, Europe, or someplace else? And the answer is here pretty divided. So, I mean, if you think that if it's US and Canada only, I mean, it's only like 10% of this, but majority, 44% are saying that it's diversified, and 34% of the aggregators are saying that preferably US and Canada. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make that big of an impact if the seller is selling only on one marketplace. Then, so do you target stores that are owned by sellers residing in specific region or anywhere in the world? So this means that, okay, so you have a legal entity. So does that matter? Like, can you be based in Finland, Estonia? Do you need to be based in US? I mean, if you have a business in Hong Kong, like, do you need to set up an LLC in the US? And typically the answer has been that, I mean, if you want to have the maximum amount of potential buyers, then you will get those with LLC. But this is a like good example here that, I mean, majority, 75 or 70, almost 76% of these aggregators were saying that, I mean, it doesn't make any difference. We do not have a specific preference. I mean, we buy brands from any seller in any country, because they are not going to be buying your legal entity. It's a matter of, they're just basically buying your company's assets. So meaning the trademark, the product listing, inventory, and so on. So we can see that 10% were saying that they may mostly purchase brands that are owned by European sellers, and then only like 5% that they prefer to buy only from like American sellers. So by having a US LLC, you will get more of potential buyers, but it doesn't mean that you need to do it necessarily. Then profitability. What kind of profitability is required or is more attractive? Typically, I mean, it is 20% that is seen as deemed as desirable. And over 50% of buyers said that they require at least 15 percent of SDE, sellers discretionary earnings, profit margin for Amazon FBA businesses. And 65 of these respondents said that typically, I mean, the minimum purchase price that they are going to be looking at is 500K to million. And also half of the aggregators said that they do not have an upper limit for their acquisitions, meaning that they are basically willing to buy. I mean, they have no maximum amount that they would be willing to pay for a business. So here we have different kinds of profit margins, and we can see here that like 30% are saying that, yeah, I mean, profit margin should be at least 15%. But also at the same time, like 14% are saying like they know they don't really have any kind of minimum profit margin. So yes, this is also good to like understand that what are these aggregators actually buying? If they're not buying the actual legal entity, then what is it that they are buying? So 90% replied that, I mean, they either purchase assets only or prefer to purchase the assets only. So the reason is that, I mean, it's far more like simple process to just buy the assets than the legal entity or then even talking about this like stock acquisition. And 61% prefer this full acquisition, while 37% may consider this partial acquisition, meaning that they would just buy certain like partly your company, or then it would be like this gradual, like year by year, meaning that, okay, first this year you would sell like, okay, 20% of your business or whatever, and then you are going to be working on this business for a certain period of time, and they would additionally give you like cash to grow your business. So that's kind of the deal that many are actually open to. But yeah, most buyers seem to be confident in their ability to scale the business on their own after a short transition period. So do you buy and migrate the entire account or just brand and listings? So 41%, so majority is saying that the entire account, so meaning the seller central account. So that means that when you sell your business, they expect to get your seller central account as well, including the whatever you have there. So that's also one thing to keep in mind, is that if you have multiple brands in your seller central account, then it's going to be adding a bit of a complexity there. I mean, if you're not going to sell all of the brands that you have. So that's why you should usually, I mean, you can sell many different brands under one seller central account, but that doesn't really mean that you should do that. So it really depends on what is your plan, like what's your exit plan. So if you're planning to sell just one of the brands, then maybe it makes sense to separate those. Yeah, and as we saw earlier, like mostly like aggregators prefer to make it just an asset purchase, and full acquisitions, meaning that they buy the whole business, the whole brand. So let's look at the different deal types. So most of these aggregators actually offer this like cash upfront with then this followed by an earn out. So typically, I mean, most sellers just want to get the cash immediately and then don't want to work for years and years with this business. So that's what actually most of these aggregators are offering, meaning that they pay you like 80% now, and then based on how the brand performs for 1 year or so, they are going to be paying you additionally. And that's one reason. One reason why they do it is that they just want to mitigate the risk of this, seeing any kind of potential unknowns in the business, something that might not have popped up in the due diligence process. But this is also surprising that over 40% of the buyers offer or occasionally offer equity in the holding company. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it, because some of these aggregators don't really know what they are doing, meaning that they have zero experience on selling on Amazon, and so say that they have this like banking background, and selling on Amazon is not real estate. The numbers alone tell you nothing. So if you don't have the Amazon experience, then it can be a like wild ride. But yeah, so we saw previously that most deal structures are cash upfront and then this earn out. And typically the cash upfront portion was 70 to 80%. And then sometimes some of these aggregators actually can offer stock options in the holding company as part of the deal. But yeah, currently there's like hundreds of these aggregators, so they have different ways of working and offering different kinds of deals. But this is actually really interesting question. So how many SKUs should the business have? And majority here said that it really depends on the SDE, so it depends on the profit. So some people say that any number of SKUs, which is interesting, 13%. I don't know why would anyone reply like that. Okay, it can be any number of SKUs, because more SKUs means that there's more to manage, and typically, the less SKUs, the better. Of course, it also means that there's more risk, meaning that if there's only one product and the one product goes down, then everything goes down. So there has to be just this right balance. But this also means that you can sell a business with only one product. So that's not a problem at all. And inventory, it's usually an addition to valuation, and it would be pretty odd if it's actually included in valuation. So no, typically, inventory is always handled separately, so the buyer will just pay for the inventory. So it's paid at close. So it is considered as separate to the purchase valuation, and is generally paid in full upon closing. So after you sign the contract and everything, so how long do you need to stay in the business? So this is a bit varied here, but we can. Important thing here is to notice that none of them are saying that you should be a year or more, and most often it's the case that seller is released immediately after the training. So once you basically hand over your business to them and give any kind of SOPs, and you basically teach the buyer about your business, about your products, and so on. Like once you have completed that, then you can basically say goodbye, and you never have to think about it again. So in most cases, the seller does not need to remain in the business for a longer period of time. And typically, and this was especially the case a couple of years ago. Like most people assumed that, I mean, having multiple sales platforms, sales channels will actually increase the valuation. But I mean, currently the situation is no. I mean, selling outside of Amazon does not necessarily does not necessarily increase your valuation, especially if they don't drive like significant amount of sales. Like, and as we saw before, like most of these are just putting all bets on Amazon. So if you are doing like good amount of volume in your own store, I mean, of course that profit will be like accounted for, but it doesn't necessarily increase your multiples or anything like this. But I mean, majority all at the same time say that, I mean, if you have something special going on, like patterns and designs, then I mean, that will definitely increase the valuation. This was actually one of the only factors that most buyers found valuable. So good important thing to point out here is that when the question is like, do you offer a higher multiple for business with any of these things? The majority answer here, not necessary, not necessary, not necessary, not necessary. So selling also in Walmart or eBay, I mean, doesn't really matter. Selling like on Shopify, having this social presence, Facebook, Instagram accounts, and doing wholesale or offline retail, I mean, none of that really matters. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, if it increases your profitability, that's great, but just as such, I mean, it doesn't have any impact. And then this is also important to point out that, okay, does it matter where you source your products? And 68%, like majority, are saying that it doesn't matter. So some of these are saying that they would prefer to work with Chinese suppliers, and that's typically if they are already having existing suppliers, so they could actually combine, and if they have already made their like supply chain and all that stuff, so in that case it might actually would be easier for them to manage. But I mean, in most cases, most aggregators are saying that no, it doesn't have any impact. You can source anywhere, and as pointed out earlier, like patterns, designs, whatever, I mean, yes, I mean, that will definitely increase the multiple. So in summary, I mean, there are more acquisitions to come. Like we saw, like they are expected to be like next year, 2022, like over 1,000 different acquisitions. So more aggregators who become more aggressive to buy. And there's already like, I don't know how many, like, because there's just more money moving into this space, and there's just more like new aggregators popping up all the time, because it's just such a lucrative business model. So this also means that, I mean, when there's more buyers, then multiples go up, which is great if you're selling on Amazon, because it means that more buyers are going to be bidding in your business, and they want to have like so you can basically beat these buyers against each other. And this is really, really important to keep in mind. Like if you're planning an exit, then consider that, okay, how can you get the highest valuation? And the key thing is profit. So everything you do, if you're targeting an exit, so then everything you do should be focused on increasing profit, because everything else really is secondary. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I have a question about this profit. So do you happen to have a slide about how they look at the profit? Because it's quite different from European way of looking at profits.
What do you mean?
So it's, I mean, like how do they check the profit? So they exclude salaries, they exclude that sort of. So it's mainly, or is it mainly the net profit?
Well, I mean, typically it's EBITDA, so earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortizations. But I mean, in smaller business doing some few millions, then it's this SDE, sellers discretionary earnings. So it just means that there are some things that will be then excluded, like as you mentioned, like salaries. Basically consider it such that, okay, if I buy your business, then or actually I don't buy your business, I just buy your assets, then what are the like ongoing expenses that I need to be paying? I mean, I don't need to pay for your salaries. I don't need to keep paying for any kind of tools that you have. I don't need to keep paying for any kind of business expenses that you might have that are not like recurring and not related with in maintaining the business.
Yeah, so it doesn't count any, what is it in English? Kiinteät kulut. So.
Yeah, pretty much. Or like what kind of expenses do you have in mind?
Yeah, just the salaries and the company expenses and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, not like bookkeeping or
yeah.
None of that stuff. Because I mean, as when I get your assets, I don't need to pay for those, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty much easy way how to think about it. Yeah. So I mean, if you guys want to get the full report, then you can get it from here. So Fortunet Buyer Survey 2021. So this is a recent survey they just released like a few weeks ago. So very interesting information. So what do you think? Hit a thumbs up if you like this video. And if you need my help in building and selling your Amazon FBA business, then book a call with me and let's talk. See you soon.